Lexis stood up, holding her cheek where Luenell had slapped her earlier. She glared at him threateningly and warned, "Even though you're a prince, if you keep acting like this, as the princess's subordinate, I'll be forced to take action." Luenell began losing his composure, enraged but silent. He started sweating and stared at her intensely. With a mocking smile, he called her a parasite and asked what she was going to do about it. He threatened that if she continued interfering, he would have her and her entire family executed, using her words as the excuse to erase her entire lineage. Lexis, shocked and afraid, slowly lowered her hand from her cheek. She knew things were turning bad. Before Luenell could continue his threats, Princess Erin stepped in and calmly ordered him to stop. "Is there a reason you came to see me?" Erin asked. "Did you want to hear something from me?" Luenell, sweating and confused, stared at her, wondering how she knew what was happening. Erin gazed at him calmly and repeated her question. "Do you want to hear something from me?" Luenell panicked, speechless, as he noticed something was different about Erin. He wondered if this was the same Erin Severus he knew. "Or should I just tell you what you want to hear from me?" Erin said, "I, Erin Severus, have not received anything from you." Luenell's confusion deepened, and he began sweating even more, feeling a growing sense of danger. He couldn't respond. A few hours earlier, Princess Erin had gone to see the king. Sitting on the sofa in his office, she closed her eyes and answered his question. "Yes, father, I'm sure there's no relationship." The king, looking at her with uncertainty, reminded her, "The necklace you brought me holds a jewel that's not ordinary. It's a Daze stone from the Black Blood tribe." The king explained that the Daze stones were once used to control forbidden dark magic, particularly to dominate monsters. Though now disdained, it was said these stones were used for controlling dangerous creatures. He told Erin that there had been recent information about someone inside the palace secretly purchasing one of these jewels. He mentioned a black market merchant named Gilbert and a maid named Marilda. Both had been involved in making deals for some time, but now both were either missing or dead. Hearing this, Erin's eyes filled with confusion, though she remained outwardly calm. The king then revealed that Gilbert and Marilda had been in frequent contact with Luenell and asked Erin again if she was sure she hadn't received anything from him, implying the necklace could have been a gift from Luenell. Nervously touching her fingernails, Erin, with a trembling voice, denied ever receiving anything from Luenell. The king observed her in silence, his expression calm. Erin, avoiding his gaze, stared at the ground and said, "It seems you've discovered who brought the jewels into the palace. Lunov should no longer be a suspect." She pleaded with the king to let Lunov go, reminding him that Lunov had saved many people at the banquet. The king, seated on the sofa, crossed his arms and reassured her not to worry. In her mind, Erin thought that if she revealed Luenell's involvement in this, she couldn't predict what he might do to those around her. She remembered how the captain had been killed by a mandrake plant and knew she couldn't let something like that happen again. She had to protect those close to her from being hurt in the future. Back in the present, Erin turned her gaze toward Luenell and asked if this was what he wanted. He stood up, put his hand in his pocket, and, as a suffocating energy surrounded him, stared at her and said, "Yes, and I've never given you anything." Princess Erin remained calm and told him, "That's exactly what I told my father." Luenell's gaze filled with rage. He couldn't understand her attitude and grew increasingly angry. "Why are you acting as if I've done something wrong?" he asked. Luenell approached Erin and asked if he should deal with her subordinate first. Princess Erin, with her hands on her knees, closed her eyes and calmly apologized, revealing that she had a guest. Luenell, confused, asked who could be more important than him. She raised her head and, with a serious expression, said, "You are important to me too." Behind them stood Cyan, leaning against a pillar with his arms crossed. He looked down at the ground and apologized to Luenell, saying he didn't mean to intrude. Hearing Cyan's voice, Luenell was shocked and started sweating. He hadn't noticed Cyan's presence at all and didn't know why he was there. Cyan put his hands in his pockets, raised his head, and with a suffocating look, said he had heard everything. Luenell's body trembled with fear, and he asked Cyan how long he had been hiding there. Cyan, stepping away from the pillar, began walking toward them. "Hiding?" he asked, sounding confused. Pointing to himself with his thumb, Cyan explained, "I simply don't have much presence. It's the main trait of assassins. We're invisible." Lunov clenched his teeth in frustration. He couldn't believe Cyan was speaking so casually in his presence, and he wondered if this was some kind of joke. Furious, he questioned how Cyan dared to speak like that in front of him. Cyan approached the sofa where Princess Erin was sitting, placed his hand on the armrest, and looked at Lunov. With a mocking smile, he asked, "What are you going to do about it? Are you going to try something with me too?" Princess Erin observed Lunov silently, her expression serious. Though Lunov was angry, he managed to stay calm, now observing Cyan more carefully. He couldn't help but wonder if the rumors about their engagement were true. Becoming Cyan Vert's enemy would be dangerous for him, since after all, he was the son of his father's friend. Lunov couldn't stop thinking about what Askell had told him earlier. A few hours ago, while they were walking down the palace hallway, Lunov had revealed that he wanted to remove Princess Erin from the throne, but he couldn't understand why Askell wanted to get rid of his own younger brother. After all, their father already trusted him a lot. Askell, walking beside him, looked at the ground and mentioned how much Cyan irritated him. Lunov listened silently as Askell's eyes shone with seriousness. Askell revealed that Cyan was hiding something big, something that got on his nerves. Now, back in the present, Lunov watched as Cyan stood behind Erin's sofa, smiling while emitting a powerful and intense energy. Finally, Lunov understood what Askell had meant. He didn't know what this unsettling feeling of intimidation from Cyan was, but it confused him. Lunov raised his hands, indicating that he was done. With a pleasant smile, he said, "All right, I was just joking. Now that the misunderstanding is cleared up, I'll leave." He turned his back on them and headed for the door. Cyan watched him with a confused expression, and even Princess Erin couldn't help but blush with Cyan standing so close. As Lunov neared the door, the guard opened it for him. He turned his head slightly and apologized to Leximus. She looked at him and asked him not to worry, also apologizing for her earlier actions. Lunov then turned to Cyan, staring at him intently, and warned him to be careful from now on. A few moments later, he left Princess Erin's room, and the guards closed the door. Lexis, standing by the door, sighed with relief. She turned back, venting a little to herself, thinking Lunov was still a piece of work. She thanked Cyan, while Princess Erin, still sitting on the sofa and blushing, also thanked him. Cyan looked at Leximus and told her that he hadn't done much, finding it amusing that this was the attitude of the continent's best swordswoman. He added that Princess Erin had done most of the work. Blushing like a tomato, Erin denied it, saying it was all thanks to him. Cyan then sat on the sofa next to her. Seeing this, she leaned back, blushing even more, and said, "Ah, you're sitting next to me?" Cyan explained that his legs hurt from standing too long and asked if he wasn't allowed to sit beside her. She looked away, playing with her hair, feeling flustered. Cyan was confused by her reaction, while Leximus watched him with a bewildered look, thinking he was clueless. Cyan stood up, approached the door, and grabbed the knob. Turning slightly, he said they had successfully made Lunov believe that he and Erin were together, so Lunov wouldn't be able to act against her for a while. He decided to leave, and Erin, now blushing even more, put her fists in front of her face. Leximus, forcing a smile, asked him to take care. She thought to herself that Cyan was arrogant, but he had only done what was necessary. Meanwhile, Lunov met with Askell. Furious, he slammed his hand against the wall next to Askell, who stood there with his arms crossed. Glaring at Askell, Lunov demanded to know how they were going to fix this, his face twisted with anger. He clenched his teeth, shouting that Askell had promised the plan was perfect, yet everyone they wanted dead was still alive. Worse, Lunov had lost the king's trust, which was a serious blow. Askell remained calm, staring at him without saying a word. Lunov, unable to control his anger, screamed that he was supposed to be the savior of the goddamned Ushif Empire. At that moment, a man approached Askell and Lunov, interrupting their conversation, and announced that there had been some success. Luenell, who still had his hand on the wall, turned and demanded to know who the man was. Askell remained silent, arms crossed, observing the interaction. The man was none other than Boris Elhelm. Bowing his head with a hand on his chest, Boris greeted Prince Luenell. Luenell stepped away from the wall and, with anger simmering in his eyes, asked Boris where he had been all this time. Boris calmly explained that he had been fulfilling an order from Askell. Askell, his gaze turning serious, mentioned that he had heard Emily had disappeared and asked Boris what success he had achieved. Boris reached into his pocket and pulled out a bright, pyramid-shaped crystal, smiling as he held it up. He mentioned that they had been underestimating the people around Princess Erin. Luenell, putting his hands on his hips, retorted sarcastically, asking if Boris was implying he should reflect on his mistakes. Still holding the crystal, Boris shook his head and responded, "No, there's nothing for you to reflect on." As he brought the crystal closer to them, its energy intensified. He explained that the crystal, called a Mona crystal, had absorbed the mana used by Erin's friends during a recent battle. Most of the mana inside it was ordinary, but something else lingered. Bringing both hands closer to the crystal, Boris caused a black fog to seep out of it, rapidly filling the room. Luenell was taken aback by the sight, shock etched on his face, while Askell remained calm, watching intently. Boris continued to explain that this black fog was extremely rare and malevolent. It was the mana of a demonic sword. With a grin of excitement, Boris revealed that someone among Princess Erin's companions possessed a taboo, demonic sword. Meanwhile, elsewhere, someone was served a dish of what looked like a giant centipede. The unpleasant appearance of the dish left Brian feeling confused and disappointed. He had been expecting crab stew and wasn't quite sure what he was looking at. Cyan and Nana, seated at the table with the others, ate their meal as though nothing strange was happening, seemingly unbothered by the grotesque dish in front of them. Nana, in fact, was thoroughly enjoying the food, much to the surprise of those around her. Emily, sitting nearby, chuckled and said, "Nana, eat slowly, you're really enjoying it." Her tone was cheerful, and she seemed genuinely pleased. Brian, however, was not as enthusiastic. He looked at Nana with a bewildered expression, thinking to himself that she must be out of her mind to enjoy such a meal. When he glanced at his own plate, his eyes widened in fear as he noticed something moving among the food. His stomach churned as he fought back his disgust. Meanwhile, Cyan casually placed both hands on the table and announced, "I'm full." Emily, not wanting him to leave, urged him, "You should eat a little more." But Cyan had already wiped his mouth with a cloth and closed his eyes, politely refusing. "I can't stay here any longer. Askell might catch on." His voice was calm, but the mention of Askell caused Emily to slam her fist on the table in frustration, cursing his name under her breath. Once Cyan was done, he explained, "I only came to check on you. It's not safe for you to return yet. If you need anything, send Brian." He gestured toward the window, indicating the vigilance surrounding the area. Outside, hidden in the branches of a tree, a member of the Mist was keeping watch. Cyan had taken precautions to ensure the safety of this place, making it one of the safest locations for now. As Cyan stood and moved toward the door, Emily's face grew anxious. "Cyan, please come back," she called out, not wanting him to leave. Turning his head slightly, Cyan reassured her, "Don't worry and take care of yourself." He then directed his gaze to Brian, who was still staring at his plate of centipede meat, and called his name. Brian, startled, turned around while absent-mindedly lifting a forkful of food to his mouth. Cyan smirked to himself, realizing Brian might very well meet his demise just from trying to survive Emily's cooking. As Cyan stepped out of the house, the sunlight spilled across the wooden door, bathing him in its glow. Before he could leave, however, a voice caught his attention. "Nice little family you have there," someone remarked. Turning slightly, Cyan saw Sica, another member of Mist, standing nearby, her eyes fixed on him with curiosity. Her gaze was sharp, and as she stared at him, she asked, "Are you going to explain now how you knew about the blood banquet? And about my fiancé's death?" You've been acting like you know the future. Cyan remained composed, knowing he had to choose his words carefully. Sarika's shining eyes reflected both suspicion and a search for answers. If he slipped up, she might consider him an enemy. After a brief silence, she added, her tone almost demanding, "Just who are you, Cyanvert?" Sarika, furious, confronts Cyan. "How do you know about the banquet of blood and the death of my fiancé?" "There's no way you could have known that," she demands. Cyan, unbothered, responds, "Durnian was someone I had to purify anyway. Does it really matter how I know?" Sarika's anger grows, her eyes shining with a crazy intensity. "Yes, it matters," she hisses. With a smirk, she adds, "Maybe you're another spy from an organization." Cyan coldly replies, "And if I am, what are you going to do about it?" Sarika grins wickedly. "Isn't it obvious?" she says, pulling out her dagger, which glows with dark purple energy, and lunges at Cyan. But before she can strike, Kiram suddenly appears, blocking the attack. Pushing Sarika back, Kiram stands protectively in front of Cyan, her expression fierce. "You never learn, do you?" Kiram says angrily. "I told you before not to touch my owner." Sarika smirks, her madness showing. "It's you who doesn't learn," she taunts, rushing toward Kiram again, clearly enjoying the situation. Kiram raises her monstrous hand to her face and replies, "You're really annoying. You know that?" The two clash, but neither can land a perfect hit. As they fight midair, Kiram grins. "Let me show you something interesting," she says, summoning a red-black energy ball in front of her and hurling it towards Sarika. The ball is infused with the power of black fog. When it hits the ground, the impact shatters everything around it. Sarika dodges, trying to avoid the deadly attack. "No matter how strong your skill is, I can just avoid it," she boasts while running. But suddenly, she hesitates, shocked by the sheer power behind the attack. Her mind races. Is this Kiram's true power? If that ball had hit me, or if I tried to block it, I'd have died instantly. She realizes Kiram's strength, thinking, that's why she stays in her sword form most of the time. If she wanted, she could destroy an entire city. Kiram, visibly annoyed, placed one hand on her hip and muttered, "Oh, I missed." The area where her attack landed was utterly shattered, and Sarika, watching in disbelief, thought to herself, to stop someone like Kiram, I'd need at least the power of a demon king. Kiram smirked and said, "All right, you better be ready. That was just a warm-up." Sarika, smiling back, replied, "I'm excited. I guess I'll have to give my best too." But before their fight could resume, Cyan suddenly commanded, "Demon sword control." Instantly, Kiram's face slammed into the ground with a thud. Sarika, puzzled, blinked in surprise as she watched Kiram immobilized. Still face down, Kiram grumbled, "I was just getting started." Cyan smirked. "If you keep causing this much chaos, we'll all be caught." "You idiot." Sarika, now sweating and realizing the situation, thought he's right. Cyan turned to the two of them, gritting his teeth. "I'm going to handle this. You two stay here and take care of things." Then, without waiting for a response, he slammed the door shut, leaving them both standing in stunned silence. Kiram, still sitting on the ground, looked confused, while Sarika stood beside her, equally bewildered. Meanwhile, inside the house, Cyan entered with urgency. "Everyone, pack everything up right now." But his command was cut off when a calm voice greeted him. "You're finally here." Cyan froze in shock as he saw Lunov casually sitting at the dining table. Sweat formed on his brow as he quickly glanced at Brian, who was standing nearby, visibly nervous. Brian, sweating profusely, stammered, Sorry, young master." She just suddenly appeared. Cyan's mind raced. How did she get through the barrier and miss detection? Sweat dripping from his face, he looked at Lunov and asked, "How did you find this place?" Lunov, looking amused, smiled at him. "It's one of my talents. Don't worry, no one else knows about this place, just me." Then, with a playful grin, she added, "Though considering all the noise outside, I'm starting to wonder." Cyan, clearly annoyed, snapped, "Whatever. Why are you here?" Lunov tilted her head slightly and said, I just came here to say thank you. Her casual response only deepened Cyan's irritation. Cyan, still tense, asked Lunov, "What did I do for you to come here and thank me?" Lunov, with a bright and energetic smile, replied, "It's okay. I already know." Her tone shifted as she added more meaningfully, "The moment you entered me that day." Everyone in the room froze in shock, staring at the two of them. Their minds raced, trying to decipher what that statement meant. Cyan's thoughts churned too. Is she talking about that time? His mind flashed back to when he used his mana to save her, assuming she had lost consciousness. Lunov continued, unfazed by the reactions. She began to demonstrate her abilities, conjuring ice in one hand and fire in the other. "I can use all types of magic now," she said with enthusiasm. "I can even combine or switch between them." She explained further, "I can also track down a specific person's mana. Isn't that cool?" She beamed. "It's a gift from my grandfather." Cyan, growing increasingly worried, responded, "It feels more like a curse to me. Your body was broken because of that." Luna blushed and asked coyly, "But it was you, wasn't it? The one who saved me." Cyan sighed, trying to calm the situation. "Let's go somewhere else," he said, wanting to avoid any more awkward moments in front of the others. As they turned to leave, the whispers behind them grew louder. People started murmuring, speculating about what was going on between their young master and Lady Lunov. Cyan's patience snapped as he gritted his teeth and barked, "Get to packing!" Suddenly, Emily, wide-eyed and excited, asked Cyan, "Where are we going now?" Cyan replied, "We'll be heading to Lewin Academy." Emily blushed and eagerly added, "Does that mean I can take care of you every day from now on?" Meanwhile, Brian, overhearing this, paled slightly, his mind drifting to the bizarre dishes Emily would no doubt bring with her. Nana, noticing his expression, asked, "What's wrong with your face?" Brian, still in his thoughts, muttered, "I have mixed feelings about this." As Cyan and Lunov finally moved to a quieter place where they could talk privately, Lunov opened up about her past. Her voice softened as she revealed, "I spent most of my younger days in a cold and dark place. I had to endure all kinds of painful experiments there." She continued, "I had no choice but to endure everything because it was my duty as the granddaughter of Raigan's Rain Reaver." As Lunov and Cyan walked across the bridge, she asked him, "Do you also have a duty to fulfill?" Cyan shook his head and replied, "No, I don't have any." Curious, Lunov pressed further, "Then why did you save us anonymously?" Cyan, puzzled by her persistence, simply shrugged. "I don't want to become famous. It's a pain, and I'm sure you can guess why." Lunov thought for a moment before answering herself. "Oh yes, it's because of your mana elemental." She brought out a small sphere of Cyan's mana, swirling with a faint red-black aura. "At first, I thought it was darkness," she said. "I collected a bit when I met you at the restaurant a few days ago." Cyan's mind raced, still confused by her ability to collect and analyze his mana. "So she can read people's mana information just by touching them? I didn't know she could do that, even in my past life," Lunov continued. "On the day I passed out, the mana you put into me." She shaped the mana in her hand, showing Cyan the swirling, ethereal substance. "What is this? It seems like it's your mana, but not of this world at the same time." Cyan's eyes narrowed, now understanding why she had come to see him. "I see. Are you planning to take this mana to your grandfather, Raigan's?" To his surprise, Lunov absorbed the mana back in her own body and said cheerfully, "No, I won't." "Why would I? That would be a pain for me." "Why?" Cyan asked. "Is there a reason? Or are you rebelling against him or something?" Lunov, now gazing at the stars, smiled and replied, "I'm sure you can guess why I'm doing it." Suddenly, without warning, Lunov hugged Cyan tightly. He stood there, confused, as she whispered, "Thank you, Cyan, for lessening my old pain." Cyan, taken aback, began to explain her situation. "Your body, it was like a boiling pot. A boiling pot filled with all kinds of chaotic mana. Someone intentionally closed the lid on that pot, probably to prevent the loss of mana. But that led to the pot overheating, and the mana spilling out began to extinguish the fire of your life, putting you on the brink of death." He stepped back slightly, gently grabbing her by the arms, creating distance between them as he continued. All I did was put a hole in that lid, letting the pressure out. His voice turned cold as his eyes hardened. Because in my eyes, you also look like someone else's marionette. And that annoyed me very much. Cyan, with a wave of his hand, told Lunov, "You don't need to thank me." His tone was casual but firm. "I'm leaving if you've got nothing more to say. And keep my secret, okay?" As he turned and walked away, he added from a slight distance, "It'll be dangerous if you push yourself again, so please watch out." Lunov stood silently for a moment, watching him leave, a soft smile playing on her lips. "How cute," she murmured to herself, a rare fondness in her eyes. "He's definitely a good person," she thought, her gaze lingering on him as he disappeared from sight. The scene abruptly shifted to the Garum Association president's office. Inside, a man stood before Reigen's Rain Reaver, the powerful head of the association. The air was thick with tension. "President, we received word that Lunov was arrested and then released," the man reported. Reigen's face darkened with rage. "What?" he growled, slamming his fist onto the desk with a force that echoed through the room. The sound was deafening, rattling papers and shaking the room. The man hesitated but continued. "Thankfully, there were no charges filed. Should we send a petition?" Reigens, his jaw clenched tightly, responded through gritted teeth. "No, there's no need for that." The frustration was clear in his voice as he leaned forward, his eyes burning with fury. "Lunov is stopping by elsewhere. Track her down and bring her here immediately." That's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you'd like to see more manhwa recaps like this, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. That way, you'll stay updated with more content like this. Until next time.